Welcome to Audio Branding, the hidden gem of marketing. Sound plays a more important role in human behavior and our decision-making than you may realize. In this podcast, I'll help you understand the art and science of sound so you can better influence others in business and your life. I'm your host, Jodi Krangle. Let's delve a little deeper. I'm really impressed with what I have heard from Barley and Alibi and the acting and the sound design and all of that. I wanted to ask you how important the music scoring is in this. How much consideration do you give to the music, and what kind of differences do you think that makes?
Well, the music scoring is actually done as the very last step. We don't approach anything from a music first standpoint, which can make it difficult in certain areas because music, I'm a musician myself. I play piano, saxophone, drums, guitar a little bit. So just trying to balance around a little bit. But I've spent enough time.
Multi-instrumentalist. I'm impressed.
That's allowed me the chance to play at a few state orchestra level, things, and so get that experience of more cinematic music, which is all normally orchestra based. And so for me, as we edit, especially when I edit shows, I leave a little space. I try to give a little thing where you normally wouldn't leave space because it would be odd, right? Like there's this pause in the conversation or something like that. And if you just listen to it dry without the music, it's like, well, that's odd. That's ill time. That person's waiting 10 seconds longer to speak than they should. And those are the little areas where we know, okay, musically, we're going to enhance the mood here, or we're going to change the direction, or we're going to, maybe it's a revelation or some sort of thing where you would add a music accent, and that changes the flow of how the person is processing it. So from a music standpoint, we give a little time consideration to it when editing just the dialogue and sound effects and atmosphere. But when we come back around to it, literally, it's like playing the audio drama and the music under it as it's going, which allows a very organic sense of music creation, which is also slightly different from the film approach, where they tend to write these scores after that. They watch the movie, they do the score, and then they come back and they add it. It works or it doesn't work. For us, it's very organic and sort of happening as the drama is playing in that last step.
Really interesting. Yeah, I haven't heard of that being done last before. So yeah, it's an interesting way of looking at it. But yeah, I mean, as part of the sound design.
Not to interrupt, but it just occurred to me, if you've ever seen the movie The Truman Show with Jim Carrey, there's a portion where he's meeting his dad. If you haven't seen the movie, sorry for any spoilers, but he's meeting his dad, and the director is directing the gentleman in the back who's playing on this keyboard, and he's live making this moment, which is the sort of organicness of the show, and he kind of tells him to raise the music, and it's really emotional, and they bring this thing together for this beautiful moment, and everybody's crying and all this kind of thing. And so that's kind of how we do Storymore at the end. So once the whole thing is together, you just kind of play it, and we're sort of in the back with our MIDI keyboards and kind of working this thing. And of course, once we've gotten a general idea, then we kind of add to that, because we know certain time cues and that sort of thing after it. But that's very close to how it actually happens for us.
That's really great. It kind of reminds me of the old-timey music or old-timey films where they used to have the piano player at the front, right?
There you go.
No sound other than the piano, but yeah, it's interesting.
Perfect.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, if whatever works, and it seems to work, so that's fantastic. So I know that you're a musician yourself. You just mentioned that. So how did that come to be? How have you been using your music lately? Is that all now on Storymore, or do you do other music?
I started just as, my parents just wanted me to learn a craft, and she saw I had some affinity to music. So I did take lessons as a kid. I was 5 years old. I found it very boring because I play by ear. And so the idea of sitting down and learning notes was not appealing to me in terms of reading it. And then,
oh my goodness.
Being a low vision
You
person
and I are so
myself,
similar.
And I found it sort of difficult myself when doing notes. I don't know if anybody's ever read sheet music, but it's kind of tiny, and for a guy that's low vision, you're kind of like, what's going on here? And so I just never found the the right stroke for it. I learned enough to get a start into music theory and understanding, obviously, my scales and chromatics and all the things that I needed to know. But the rest of it has been by ear, and the easiest trade for that was obviously in the faith-based realm. So I've played for a lot of churches growing up, and as I grew, got the opportunity to get some other opportunities, play Christmas parties, jazz clubs, these types of things, and helped a couple of local artists with some background music, and I'll do weddings and things like that today. So that's where some of my weekends get spent, is just doing those types of gigs or musical opportunities.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. Did you come from a musical family? Like, were a lot of people in your family musical? Or
No.
is that a no? Is that a big no?
I mean, no, my mom sings, and my sister sings. My mom she just likes to sing. She will tell you herself, I like to make a joyful noise, and she's good. She as they say, could carry a tune in a bucket. My sister is a great opera singer. She's branched into that
Oh,
area.
wow.
Outside of that, though, nobody plays an instrument or any of that kind of thing. So the answer's got to be no, with maybe an exception here or there. So,
Well, that's okay. You can raise your family to be musical. That's
yeah,
what,
yeah, there you go. Yeah, we're working on that
Yeah.
part. There you go.
Oh,
Yeah, my
good.
son plays
Yeah.
guitar,
Okay.
and my kids, they all sing. I will say that my kids do sing. So
Nice.
we're working pretty hard on that. And my oldest son also plays keyboard and drums. So yeah, I would say my parents didn't quite get it, but my kids are doing pretty well.
Okay. You're passing it on. That's good.
Right. There you go.
Always good to do. Yeah. So if we've talked about your musical influences, but how did your love of the spoken word come to be? Because clearly Storymore is a lot about spoken word. So where did that come from?
Well, I've been an avid film watcher. Now, it's funny, I consider myself an avid film watcher, yet you could name several films and people are just shocked. You haven't seen that? But there's a world of stories out there, and way more movies than anybody has time to watch, especially with six kids. So I try to get time in when I can and enjoy a good film. But I'm sort of classic in that sense. I love, from a musical standpoint, I like everything, all things pre 1980. The older, the better. And from a musical standpoint, it's about the same. I enjoy classic films, all the way back to Bing Crosby, Holiday Inn, Fred Astaire. Just a lot of those great films from that time when Broadway was really ending their streak and Hollywood was really starting to emerge strongly. And so for spoken word, I have just developed a lot of love for a good script and how well it can be delivered. The Ten Commandments with Charleston Heston and Cecil B. DeMille, and how they approach that. And of course, from a radio standpoint, as I got older, I began to not only go from sort of modern shows that were modern dramas, I began to notice that, hey, 1940s had, man, that was radio. Johnny
Oh,
Dollar
yeah.
and
Yeah.
The Shadow, the Whistler. I mean, those were the things that I loved, because it's all good dialogue on the page and a good character that can bring it out. So I would say that's got planted early and developed really well through the years.
Yeah, yeah, I can see where that would have come from. I used to travel a lot with a friend of mine who, in his SUV, would have Sirius XM. It's kind of more like a truck, actually, but but he'd have Sirius XM, and he'd have these old, like, we'd be traveling for hours, and he'd have these old time radio shows on all the time, and it was really fascinating to listen to them and the sensibilities way back then, and especially from a woman's point of view, hearing what they were doing with women in these shows, which often wasn't all that great. So
Mm-hmm.
it was interesting to see what was going on. Yeah.
It's interesting
Especially
to see the
around,
time frame.
yeah, definitely. And especially around like wartime, because that then became a lot of propaganda. So it was really interesting to listen to and sort of from a historical standpoint, sort of sit back and go, that's
Yeah.
interesting.
I'm still interested to
Yeah.
this day to discover. I just mentioned Johnny Dollar, which I think Johnny Dollar ran from 1951 to 1957. My
Hmm.
favorite actor who played the role was a gentleman named Jeff Chandler. No, I'm sorry, he played Michael Shane. But there's another actor that plays Johnny Dollar, and he had the best run to me. But the thing
Hmm.
about his time was, I would listen to the show, and they would say something like a price, for instance. I rented a car for $7, and I'm just like, man, or I bought a plane ticket for $930 to Peru or something, and I'm just like, it's interesting how the economy was completely different, and then in other aspects exactly the same. So I'm just,
Yeah.
it's exciting. It's very fun to listen
Oh.
to.
Well, airfare was a very different experience back then.
Mm, right? No kidding.
So,
No
yeah,
kidding.
wow. So, speaking of different time periods, I kind of want to ask you about what the pandemic changed with your services. So, I mean, a lot of things have happened. We're kind of on the, well, we're not really at the end of it. It's never going to end at this point, but we're at the point where we can at least live again. We can at least like go outside and see people again. So while
Mhm.
we were stuck inside, while this was all going on, did things change at Storymore? Did you find that things improved or were there aspects of what you're doing that became easier or did it get harder in certain ways? I'm just curious as to your perspective.
Well, exclusively right here on the Audio Branding podcast, I can safely admit that um, our time during the pandemic, for me, was a bit frustrating. And I think for any entrepreneur, you come into a point of frustration because if you're not exactly at a certain point, right, you feel like you may have missed one of the escalators to get you where you wanted to be. And for us, that was a time where we were still in very key development. Investments were being secured and these types of things. And I felt, man, if we had been 1 year ahead from where we are now, this was the time this brand would have become a household name by the end of the year because nobody had anything to do but sit at home, and find new sources to entertain themselves, which is why the statistics show podcasting went through the roof in 2020. So for us, the major change wasn't operational because our cast anyway was already working from home. But for those that still worked a day job and would come home and do this as a side gig or something like that, this was an opportunity for them now to have much more time to devote to it because again, they were at home as well, finding ways to occupy their time. So that was probably the biggest change is the availability for everybody changed, which did allow us to escalate some things and move timelines a little faster. But I would be remiss to say that I do wish we were in a slightly different place, a little further down the road at that point. But that's the beauty of it. Is like you said, we're still dealing with the effects of it in some way today. And I believe all things happen timing wise for a reason. And we've gotten to a great place here in 2024. Stories are coming out consistently, and we're very excited to see the growth that is happening within the company.
I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah, I'm glad that it's settled into a steady increase in, putting out content. I think that's fantastic. And yeah, it's odd because as a voice actor, I found that I was much less likely to be asked to go into a studio. And having
Mm,
my own studio was way more important than it had ever been.
mm,
And I've
yeah.
had a studio since like 2011, before that, actually. So, yeah, but it became more accepted by the producers, by the people who were hiring me remotely for me to have a professional studio here and not be asked to go into another studio, which for me just means less time on the road. It means, being able to service my clients quicker, being able to do more work in a day. So it made a lot more sense. But I think that in the beginning, people were saying they had a studio and it wasn't really a working studio. And so a lot of the producers were a little hesitant to let the voice actors just do whatever because, you'd say you have a studio and it didn't sound very good. So, I think some of them got bitten once and got,
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and
Yeah,
I'm curious
it's,
about that as well because for so many, you mentioned the quality of studio that you had,
mhm.
which is another initiative for us that for many of our voice actors that have come in, they were talented, right, but didn't have the equipment or something like
Yeah.
that. And we've been able to send out sort of small, starter packages to them that included a mic or, pop filter, a little sound treatment, things like that that at least allowed them to be able to provide enough quality to us to move forward and give them an opportunity to perform and show their talent, which is something that would have been prohibitive as well before 2020 because it just wasn't thought of so readily. So, excellent point on
Yeah.
that end.
Yeah, and I'm sure that the equipment has gotten a lot less expensive, so it's easier to send out to these people, which
Mhm.
fantastic and good on you for doing that because clearly there's a lot of talent at Storymore that needs to be highlighted. So, yeah, well done. So, I'm going to
Awesome.
get a little philosophical with you here because I want to get your opinion on why you think sound matters. Just in general, where do you think that comes into our lives?
Well, I'm going to actually quote a scripture again. Not to bring too much faith into your audience, but there is a section of scripture in the Bible that says faith or belief or trust or hope, whatever the case may be, however you might label it, comes by hearing. And I think that that's an important quote for this question because for all of us, we are gaining our trust, our stability, our hope, our aspirations, our inspirations, um, all come to us through the medium of sound. Uh, Video is important, right? But FDR was able to keep a country from going mad on the brink of fear and concern and anxiety by fireside chats over the radio during the war. And we still look to our presidents today. President Bush during the 9/11 was able to speak to the audience through that bullhorn with that famous clip there. To be able to say what he had to say. President Lincoln, with his 272 word Gettysburg Address, was able to calm and heal a nation there on that battlefield. So even if we didn't see him, we didn't see his demeanor, even if you didn't see the newscast with President Bush or any of these things, you heard them. You heard their confidence. You heard their hope. You heard their emotion. You heard their connection. And that is why sound is so important, because if that's done properly, then it brings you and those who are listening a whole world of comfort.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Yeah, I think it connects us as human beings. Sound is important. It reaches our heart, and
It
that's
does.
what makes us human. I mean, we're all a part of that interlinking connection, and sound helps us connect. So, yeah,
Absolutely.
that's a really good point. Yeah, thank you, Micah. Yeah. So, what are you working on now that you can talk about?
Well, all things are under lock and key, right? But
Of
no,
course.
we've got several things that we're we've got several things we're working on. Obviously, we move into the holidays, and there's Halloween things and Thanksgiving things and Christmas things, and then we look into the next year already on things that are going to be relevant towards certain seasonal aspects. But moreover, what you can expect is that we, as I mentioned, are looking to fill every single category, every genre.
Hmm.
So you can expect that we will consistently have a new show. If there's a niche we hadn't gotten to yet, we're looking to fill that. So that's my clue, to let you know what will be.
Okay. That's a good clue. That's okay. And how can people reach out to you? How can they get in touch, and how can they experience Storymore?
Cool. Well, the experience is free, so no subscription fees or anything like that. We wanted everybody to have access to a good story, so you can check it out wherever you find your favorite podcast. But we ourselves like Apple Podcasts, so we point you there first. If not, if you're an Android user, great. Hey, you can enjoy it on Spreaker.com by iHeartRadio. And just search Storymore on either platform, and you'll find that there. And also Storymore.com, obviously, is the easiest way to access our stories directly. If you want to contact us at all for any particular reason, you can just, again, reach out to info@storymore.com. Let us know what your concern is. We'll make sure your email is directed to the appropriate party to handle your request.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Micah. This has been really interesting discussion. And I love what you're doing at Storymore. Keep doing more of it, because we need good sound in this world.
Absolutely. Well, we would thank you for the opportunity to talk about this today. Also, I meant to mention as well, if you want to have some fun with us, join us on our socials as well. We have conversations going about our stories, characters, prizes, behind the scenes access, previews, even some workshop things to show you, again, how we do what we do and how you can do it and improve your talent or skill as a voice actor. Okay, so we're on TikTok at My Storymore. Or you can be on Facebook as well at My Storymore. So either or, and then on Twitter at Storymore. So thank you so much.
Great. I will put this all in the show notes, and I so appreciate your time, Micah. Thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you, Jodi. It's been a pleasure. You have a good one.
You too. Well, that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening. And if you like what you heard, why not tell a friend about this podcast? It's available in all the usual locations. Until next time.